Somebody's asking about closings, and what I noticed was just based on the jury's questions. I mean, Hylton's closing was somewhat effective in that the jury seemed to be focusing on the stuff that she brought their attention to. It just wasn't enough jurors. What did you think about the closing? Well, I guess it was technically the rebuttal that she gave, but what did you think about that?
I thought she made a good closing. However, I think she made it too late in the trial. I think that, well, I don't mean the closing too late, but I think it was too little too late, or too much too late, whatever. I think the jury had pretty much already made up their mind a lot after Max and during the duration of having to sit there all that time. And they pretty much told us that when we went back in the back. But overall, I think she made a good closing, a lot better than the other prosecutor.
Well, what I thought was important, she gave a very passionate closing. I knew what she was doing. I was hoping that the jurors saw it the way I was hoping they were going to see it, which was, it was essentially, and it was great, but it was kind of like a Hail Mary to try to make up for lost times, as Mr. Botts was saying. But with that emotional appeal, I thought it was, I'm probably going to mess up my dates, but my recollection is that was right before the Thanksgiving break. So I was concerned about if that emotional appeal was made and then the jurors were going to like immediately decide, but they had the Thanksgiving break to kind of bring them back to reality and let that emotional appeal kind of dissipate and get back to the evidence. And once I knew that we were into that Thanksgiving break and they were going to be thinking on it, I felt a lot better about the situation.
Yeah. And somebody says the way, this is Queen Valerie, says the way Botts feels about the witnesses is how we feel about the state. They were against the men we were fighting for. I love you, Botts. But
thank you.
Yeah. I mean, and I think the answer to this is clearly no, but can you help with getting Mounk Tounk out? I mean, is there any kind of appeal options for him on this probation revocation that landed him in prison for 5 years?
I think that there may be. It's not lost on me that he's serving about as much time as anyone that was on this case at this point. And it's sad because it seems like, as a Judge Whitaker acknowledged, that he was kind of turned the page in his life already and was doing what he was supposed to be doing. So I think that there's probably something that can be done. I don't think it's necessarily, it would be a little bit messy for any of the attorneys involved in the case to be the ones that argue for him. I think that there's probably some conflicts.
Yeah. And somebody asked about how, let me see if I can pull it up, how does it feel being defense attorneys and the public being on your side? Last question, I promise, but we'll do that one as I find the other one.
It's a good way for me to go out and retire. I really appreciate it. I couldn't have asked for anything better. And Max has got many more victories, and I hope that his last case is kind of like Ted Williams hitting a home run at his last at bat. I hope Max can do this.
Oh, Meghann gets that baseball reference.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry.
She's a big baseball fan.
Yeah. And you've done so many trials in Georgia, and it seems like they have really open camera rules. Had you done high-profile cases that were really big deals in Atlanta, or was this just the biggest case that you'd had?
Me?
Yeah, Mr. Botts. Had you had?
Well, I worked on the Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil down in Savannah with Jim Williams.
Trial. Oh wow! Well, when was that? What trial was that?
A long time ago.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds. And I know you probably can't talk about this too much, just not directly being their attorneys, but how does the verdict impact the others who were at the store? I mean, or the others who were charged in this? I mean, I guess the answer is it could lead to the negotiations that we saw. We just saw some charges dropped, but I mean, if Demekion Garlington goes to trial, the fact that these two were acquitted isn't going to come in, is it?
No, that won't come in. The disadvantage that they have now is kind of I've played the card. So they're going to have to deal with that. But at the same time, at least for Mr. Farley, there's not some of the other potentially difficult pieces of evidence that they have to deal with. Mr. Farley has, to my knowledge, no record at all. He was just someone who made clothing and would show up at the studio and get people to wear the clothing and then sell the clothing. He was just a young entrepreneur. And, you know, I've gotten to know him, and he's just an everyday guy, and somehow he's in the middle of this situation. So I feel for him. You know, I got to say hi to Demekion the other day when we were waiting on a verdict.
Yeah.
Just to give him a little interaction with someone, because he was waiting on his attorneys. And I wish everyone the best. I mean, nothing is going to be gained through wrongfully incarcerating people. And so we just gotta, you know, I'm hoping for the best, and I just hope everyone involved can move forward.
Yeah, please. Somebody has a question for you, Mr. Kokumo. What have you taken away from this trial for the future? I mean, we were talking about earlier, I think you have more trial experience than any law professor that you're sitting in front of now. Maybe not, but yeah, what are your big takeaways?
Specifically from this trial, I think it's trial etiquette, trial procedure, and what to really focus on and how to really argue and what works. I think my favorite part of this trial, all in all, and it had to come at the end, was talking to the jurors to see what disadvantages and advantages we all had as attorneys, from the prosecution side to the defense side, what certain prosecutors did and what certain defense attorneys did that really influenced them and built all in all the case. So trial procedure, I think, is kind of the biggest thing, like how to file motions, what goes on motions, what case law, what you should do. One thing I loved about Brian is how particular he was with case laws and how to find case laws that apply to certain rulings. So
yeah, that's the key. Lawyers are nothing without actual law to cite. So if you can get some ammunition for your arguments, you're even better there. So somebody wants to know how you maintain sanity during the Glanville and Love era, and I'll expand on this by saying, is there something to be said that just the chaoticness of that of that period and all the comfort breaks that Glanville had, which the jurors, as we've seen in their interviews, clearly did not like, did that actually kind of benefit the defense, because it just emphasized how chaotic the prosecutor's case was? Or would you have rather have just had Judge Whittaker on the case the entire time?
I think that there were advantages for it happening the way it happened. Yeah. I was actually surprised that the jurors didn't really put together what happened, what was behind the judge change, because I mean, we got into the ex parte in front of the jury, briefly, and I thought that they had picked up on it. I could tell by looking at the jurors that, and I already touched upon this, that they did not always appreciate the way that defense attorneys were being treated. I think in particular myself and Brian, and I could see it in their face. So part of me was okay with that because we were the underdogs at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But I was just surprised that they didn't pick up on it. But, you know, I think it worked out the way it was supposed to work out. Certainly if having Judge Whitaker take over, it added more structure, but it also sped things up.
Yeah.
And that was fine when it was 8 of us, but when it became Mr. Botts, myself, and Doug and Shaq against the whole state, then that speed was a little bit hectic at times.